Good evening. Well, good afternoon, good evening, something like that. I just know that it's hot out. This is On Deck, honest conversation, raw dialogue, unfiltered. My name is D Moss, and I'm joined by my fellow co-hosts, and they are.
Robert Jones. Greetings, everyone.
Hanif Nelson, greetings everybody.
All right. So, gentlemen, we don't have anything scripted today, but there's a lot going on. Rob, I know there are a couple of things you want to focus on. Hanif, I'm sure you always have something that you want to focus on. I got a few things. So, Rob, I'm going to let you shoot first with some of the items that you wanted to discuss today.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff popping off in Springfield, and we talked about it on the radio show, and we're going to continue to talk about it with the school committee voting for unrestricted access to all the schools, Springfield public schools, internal camera systems.
You mean the Springfield Police Department has unrestricted access?
Yes, unrestricted access. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The Springfield Police Department has unrestricted access, and that not only is that troublesome on a number of levels, but number one, the community didn't know, right? And I've spoken to a lot of people in the community; they had no idea. The Springfield Police Department was dinged heavily, severely, more than dinged by the Department of Justice. I don't know the answer to this question, but how many police stations in the state of Massachusetts have had Department of Justice investigations? Maybe a handful in Springfield.
Well, let me say this. I think the under the Trump administration, the only city that was investigated and found negligent was the city of Springfield across the country.
Across the country.
Across the country. When you get a chance, if you're watching, Google NBC, Google City Department of Justice and the Springfield, Massachusetts Police Department. They were the only ones across the country that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump, they're the only ones that they had targeted. Can you imagine when Donald Trump's administration deems you negligent and guilty of a number of atrocious crimes committed against the public? Under Donald Trump, how?
Yeah, and then you're going to give this oppressive police department unfettered access. Now, and this is pure supposition, okay? I've had a number of calls from from more than several parents that the school, their teachers, their child's teachers called them saying that their son, and it was all boys, their son might suffer from oppositional defiance disorder. So they're calling me like, what is that? What should we do? What should I do? I'm like, yo, your kid hasn't even been in school for like what, a year and a half? Almost. And all of a sudden, they're getting tagged with a label of oppositional defiance disorder from somebody who's not qualified to render such a label on a child. And then I'm drawing a correlation. And then now you have this unrestricted access to the surveillance cameras of Springfield public schools by the police department. So, yeah, I mean, you talk about creating a school to prison pipeline. You have it right there. So if the regime or the administration, whatever you want to call it, doesn't like your kid or doesn't like the parent, then all of a sudden they can focus surveillance on a particular kid. I mean, if you're following somebody long enough, you're going to find them doing something wrong. And then they're creating a dossier against this child, and which is going to just funnel them right into the school to prison pipeline. Well, I'm interested in hearing your comments on that.
Well, first off, when you mention oppositional defiance disorder, social scientists and psychologists can't even fully agree on that. How do I know that? Because I talked to one and asked them about this. And they're like, well, we in the industry don't really fully agree with this, is because the definition, I'm going to read you the definition of oppositional defiance order. It says, a disorder in a child marked by a defiant and disobedient behavior to authority figures. The cause of oppositional defiant disorder is unknown, but likely involves a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Symptoms generally begin before a child is 8 years old. They include irritable mood, argumentative and defiant behavior, aggression, and vindictiveness that last more than 6 months and cause significant problems at home or school. Much of that definition sounds like any child, period.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you only create disorders like this in the mental health field for one of three reasons. Reason number one, because there's a pharmaceutical person backing the study so that they can create a drug and make money. Reason number two, because you're targeting a particular population and you want to have a legal reason to either institutionalize them or lock them up. Reason number three, because someone needs to try to carve a niche for themselves in this industry. And so they want to come up with some pioneering study about this. This is crazy. I mean, the idea that not only was the Springfield Police Department the only police department under the Trump administration to have this report come out against them, but you still have a police commissioner that, at least in public, is in denial about the realities of that police department. I mean, serious denial. I don't live in Springfield, and I'm not in denial. You know, but this woman is in serious denial and is sitting there saying that everything is all good. If everything is all good, you would not have a Justice Department report that says the things that it says, especially under a president who did everything in his power to violate the law. And I'm not even trying to sound comical when I say this, but do either of you know who was the Attorney General when that Justice Department report was issued?
Weren't there several at the time? Like,
who was the Attorney General at the time? I'm not even sure. Who was he?
Because I'm trying to remember who it was. Because there's no way I think that this came out when Bill Barr was Attorney General.
Some folks resigned.
I can't remember the guy who was Attorney General before.
Yeah, Bill. It was Bill Barr.
It was?
It was.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Because that man turned the Department of Justice into a personal, a personal attack force for the president. But I digress. But this whole idea of the police department have unfettered access is outrageous to me, especially when we've seen school after school after school around the country, specifically in Republican-controlled states, saying they no longer want the police in their school because of some of the incidents that have happened between police officers and students that were uncalled for and that put students at risk. So, I mean, I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know one answer. I do know one answer should be that now that people are becoming aware of this, there should be some serious outrage and there should be some serious thought as to how to get this overturned. Because as Rob said, this is just leading to Springfield Police being able to legally keep tabs on kids that they've identified as a problem, or legally keep tabs on kids that one of them has a personal vendetta against.
And also, Hanif, to amplify what you were saying in terms of Commissioner Clapproot just being tone deaf, she read a statement on Mass Live regarding an issue that the members of the Massachusetts Senior Action Council had with her and calling for her removal. So remember, in a Zoom meeting at City Hall, she said that she doesn't see any systemic racism on the police force. Now, fast forward to today, on Mass Live, she read a statement saying the endemic problems, including systemic racism, plague the criminal justice system for far too long, Clapproot said. We are committed to being an active participant to not only represent a more fair criminal justice system, but an open society. So, 1 minute you're on one end of the spectrum, and the next minute you're on the diametrically opposite end of the spectrum. Which is it? And anyone could read a statement.
Well, I mean, police commissioners, I won't go out and say all because I don't know this for sure, but some police commissioners out there are really glorified politicians. So they're going to jump to whatever the end of the spectrum that's going to make them look good and allow them to keep their job as long as possible. This one doesn't seem to be any different to me. This one,
I mean, in all fairness, this one is not a politician. She is an old Irish cop. She thinks like an old Irish cop. She functions like an old Irish cop. Her job, she has no problems saying publicly or privately she is there to uphold the system the way it is. Most political, our last police commissioner was John Barberi. Good guy. He was a politician. He'd go to all the meetings. He'd meet with anyone and everyone to make sure they can resolve issues. His statements are always on point. He's a politician. He played the game to the point where he kept all sides balanced. That's a politician. An old Irish cop, the old overseer, whatever you want to call him, is this woman right here who she has no, I mean, there were times in the office when she would say things like, well, we've done enough for those people. What do you mean?
Those people.
You know, and she said it a couple of times when they brought back the officers who were involved in that act of racial terrorism at Nathan Bill. He was like, they're worried about this when they should be worried about black kids selling drugs on the streets of Mason Square. I live in Mason Square. A lot of people don't. I mean, quite a few of us do. The bottom line is you're bringing back racist police officers who are involved in a racially motivated melee, not even that, attack. And you're telling us we shouldn't worry about that. What we should worry about is little black boys selling drugs on the streets of Mason Square. So this woman right here, everybody should be sending letters to 36 Court Street, room 214, Springfield, Massachusetts, 01103, letting Dominic Sano know it's time for this woman right here. She's like Springfield's female version of Bull Connor. She needs to go.
Damn.
And Rob, let me just say one thing. As we talk about that policy that the school committee recently passed, actually it was about a month and a half ago, and it's a travesty that we have, although the three black school committee members who voted against that policy, and I'm glad they did due diligence. They voted against it. They stood their ground. But it's been almost a month and a half, and no one has taken the time. None of them have actually gone public with this information. You know, quiet phone calls behind the scene. That's not why you reelected. The minute it happened, the minute it was presented, they should have pushed to have that issue parked until the community can insert their input. That didn't happen. So at this point, as far as I'm concerned, everybody's implicit in terms of what took place, and something has to get done. Here's the irony. Here's the woman who pushed for that policy to ensure that the police department had full access to the surveillance cameras. This is the woman who advocated for it, felt that, you know, our school system needed, although it's a majority minority school system. This woman right here, she doesn't see herself as black, and she has a huge disdain for black people sometimes. Her name is Maria Perez, and everybody needs to be contacting the school department and putting in their lodging complaints against her. As we file, I know there's a petition circulating to pull that, I lost my train of thought, to have that policy revisited and revoted on with the people's input. So this is the woman who did it. So a lot of folks are mad at Clapproot, and they have every right to be, because she is not to be trusted. But this is the woman that needs to be held responsible for presenting and pushing that policy. And the mayor, superintendent, and the president of the school committee all voted for it, and along with Peter Murphy and this woman here, Maria Perez. So folks need to know. And I think what we're doing is to make sure that that's out, make sure people know who to hold accountable. Tragically, this woman is now running for city council, and she's running unopposed in her ward. So we'll have her representing the city on the city council instead of the school committee. I don't know how much worse that's going to be. So I just want to throw that out there. But go ahead, Rob.
And you know, we can't have this oppressive regime targeting our babies. You know, that's first and foremost. And like you said, Daryl, the fact that nobody on the school committee is really jumping up and down, waving the flag on this is disconcerting. Now, I can be one of those people that just have, you know, total apathy and be like, hey, well, my kid goes to a charter school, I'm good. Me and mine are straight. Me and mine are good, because the charter schools don't fall under the purview of the Springfield Public School Administration. So that, you know, they're not going to allow that. But I've got nieces, I've got nephews, I've got fictive kids call me Coach, call me Uncle Rob, all throughout this city that attend numerous Springfield public school systems, whether it's on the elementary end, the middle school end, or the high school end. And I care about each and every one of those kids. And I love each and every one of those kids. It goes beyond caring. And I don't want to see our babies getting targeted like that. People got to stand up for this. They got to stand up for this. I mean, Dal, you and I, we talked. Well, Hanif, I don't want to cut you off. Do you have anything you want to add?
Well, there's a couple of things I want to add on this. First, I wanted to revisit something that Dee just said about Clapper when she said we should be worrying about those black kids, the little black kids in Mason Square selling drugs. I tell you what, Commissioner, if you want us to be worried about that, then how about you actually bust the people that are bringing the drugs to those little black kids, and then they wouldn't have anything to sell. Okay, so if you want to talk about that, let's talk about the mechanic that gets them in there in the first place, which is under your purview, not mine, not any of us who you say we should be worried about doing this. If there were no drugs coming into the city for them to sell in the first place, then they wouldn't be able to sell them. If you weren't continually oppressing through practices some of these neighborhoods, if there weren't continual efforts to close down black businesses and to keep black economic empowerment, a thought for some and a dream for others, but not a reality for most, then you wouldn't have these problems. So you want me to think about the little black kids in Mason Square selling drugs? I'll think about that when you actually do something about the people that are bringing it into Mason Square and the city, period. That's your job, not ours. All right, that's number one. Number two, if you want us to think about those little black kids, once again, that are selling drugs, you don't need access to the school. You don't need access to the camera system, because all you're going to do is use that as a justification to target some of these kids that you think are doing something, and then just so you can have an excuse to do something and come in their neighborhood when you're not wanted there in the first place. Okay, why are you not wanted there in the first place? Because the people that are patrolling, not all of them, because I'm not going to say all of them because I don't know, but some of the people patrolling there in the first place aren't doing their job for the community to begin with. If they were doing the right job for the community, if they were servicing them in the right way, if they were not oppressing them in any way, shape, or form, or unfairly targeting them, the community wouldn't have a problem with them being there. As last I checked, once again, I'm not a Springfield resident, but last I checked, from what I've seen in the news and from what I've heard from people, a lot of people in Mason Square are not comfortable with the Springfield police that patrol their areas because they're unfairly profiled and they're treated in an unfair way. So you want us to worry about those kids selling drugs? We'll think about doing that when you actually do something about the drugs that are coming into the community. And I'll just leave it there, because otherwise I'm about to go off on a really big rant and tangent, because I can't stand bullshit excuses like this. You want to talk about, we need to be thinking about our kids, but what about your kids that are also selling it? Just because they're not Mason Square doesn't mean they're not selling it either.
Right.
Yeah. I would go on a limb too, and this is probably going to be a bold statement. I'm going to say every cop's bad unless I know them personally, because even if you're a good cop trying to do your job with that protect and serve mantra, and you witness another cop doing something that they shouldn't be doing, when you intervene or you try to speak up, you get disciplined. Not the cop, committing the atrocity. You get disciplined for speaking up. And there's innumerable examples of those. One that comes to mind is the cop in New York who was fighting almost 10 years to be able to receive her pension. Her partner was beating on a black person, and she stepped in the middle and pulled him off. And the next thing you know, she's fired, and she's fighting for, just to get her benefits. And there's been other cops around the country that have intervened in cases of police brutality, and they get penalized. So I'm saying they keep talking that bad apple. Well, it's happening too much for bad apples. The whole tree is poisoned, and I would even say even the dirt is poison, like Pet Cemetery style. Everything's poison. Unless I know you personally, and I know plenty of police officers personally, and the ones I know personally are great people. But other than that, if I don't know you, I'm going to automatically assume that you're one of the bad apples. Just like you're going to assume that I'm a bad apple and you don't know anything about me.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you also heard about the shootout that happened with the two white kids with automatic AK-47 and the shotgun. And the cop was you can hear on the cop's cam, he's praying, please, I don't want to do anything. Guys, let's hold off. Let's wait till they're out of ammo. Don't shoot him, don't shoot him. And all these cops did their job. But you got a black kid swinging on a fence with a toy gun. Before the cop could even put his car in park, he's shooting shots at him and killing him. Or black people just walking around. There was that one guy in Walmart where you can buy air rifles. Come around the corner, cops, blasted him. And then let's not talk about the people who legally carry, like Philando Castile, and he told them, "Oh yeah, I have a license to carry." Boom, dead. And not including all the other black folks, black men and women, unarmed, getting murdered by police. A lot of them getting shot in the back.
But I think a lot of that goes just to reinforce the point that's being made about why, Springfield police having unfettered access to cameras in the Springfield public school system is such a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you got all these marks from the Justice Department on your department, and you don't have a good record with fair policing, especially when it comes to minorities, and you need access to this for what? How is this going to improve the job that you're doing when you still won't fix the problems on the Justice Department report? How is this going to improve the job you're doing when you still won't listen to the community you're supposed to be protecting and serving? How is this going to improve your job when you don't even have a good record of treating the kids that go into the school, with decency and respect before you have this access? Who are you targeting? I mean, you're not even doing your job with the cops that do wrong, that are in your department. So why do you need access to our children? Why do you need the ability to see everything that they do and to be unchecked? Unfettered access literally means no one's going to even know when they're watching.
Right. They can sit there and they can watch your child all day long.
Yeah.
All day long.
And it's in black and white that they're not qualified to even do the job that they're doing. I mean, Daryl, how many town halls have we had over the past few years, whether it was Barberi or Clapprood, and what has come out of that?
Two with Barberi, 3 with Clapprood. Under Barberi, nice guy that he was, he still, we talked about all the issues of police abuse, and him and the mayor both were like, you guys are watching those, what was it, Nicki Minaj videos.
Yeah, if kids would stop listening to Nicki Minaj, this is what he said, quote, unquote. If kids would stop listening to Nicki Minaj and wearing hoodies, they'd be in a better position. I'm like,
so I suppose
good kids got hoodies.
So I suppose it's okay for them to have a hoodie if they're listening to death metal, right? Or if they're listening to Blake Shelton, it's okay.
It was crazy, and also that during that meeting was brought up. What about the handball court? You remember that, Daryl?
Yeah, I remember that.
What? I mean, the conversation went from here all the way.
But you talk about the round. I mean, we could talk about what someone bringing up the handball courts. That was someone in the audience. But in terms of dealing with the administration, people who set policy, the conversations were a tragedy. The first 2 round hall meetings we had with Dominic and the new commissioner were fairly new. Clapprood, they didn't address anything. They never responded. And I was sitting in the room, no response to anything. It's like, oh my God, I want to get off camera. The third one, she just completely denied. It was December 19th, 10:29 a.m. She denied that racism exists. Why? Because she doesn't see it. If you've been a renowned bigot your whole entire life, how in the world are you going to recognize bigotry?
They recognize it. They always want to play stupid. They always
but the reality is
that was true. I talked to a friend of mine. It was the day before yesterday. I was downtown and I ran into her and I'm like, wow. And she has a daughter who's half black. And she says, Daryl, I'm gonna tell you the truth. She said, until my daughter came, I just never noticed it. She said, I think she's from East Hadley or somewhere. She was like, I just go on with my life, Daryl. I never thought about it, never had to work. It just never seen it. She says, now I have a daughter And everything about bigotry and racism, everything triggers me because I'm so scared for my daughter. So no, they don't see it. And
Exactly.
a lot of anything. Who gives a damn about a young lady being sexually assaulted when you don't have daughters, or a sister, or a mother, or some woman that you care about? It's not until it begins, not until you can identify with someone else's situation, that you really begin to give a damn. There are black people who don't give a damn about black people until the day they're called a nigger. And once they're called a nigger, all of a sudden, oh my God!
Yeah, where's everybody at?
Or they find they've been trying to get in, and they realize that nobody will let them in, they don't fit in, and all of a sudden they build up this resentment against white people, and all of a sudden they're just super pro-black and they're anti-white. They're starting to see things they've never seen their whole entire life. So no, I think we give some people the benefit of the doubt. It's like we always assume that white educators should be teaching black history. We assume that they know. They came from the same educational systems that we came from. If they didn't have a professor like Hanif, they wouldn't know anything about the Afro-cultural aspects of jazz and classical music. But they would get their degrees, they start teaching, and we would expect them to teach. So, Rob, I hear what you're saying, but when you say that, no, I don't think they give two issues about it. The bottom line is most of them grow up with these preconceived notions of black people. So when they hear about someone getting shot or beat down by the police, those people. Like the young man at Anna Maria College, and we went down there to speak. He was mad, arrogant about what he had to say. My cousin's a police officer in Springfield, and he tells us all the time about the blacks. I know the blacks. We black people, and remember that dude? We're black people, and he's telling us about the blacks. His ignorance. So we give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they really know their stuff. And the reality is, if you've ever sat across the table from them, you realize a lot of folks are dumb as hell. But we give them that benefit of the doubt because of their Euro vernacular and the color of their skin.
And I mean, if we're going to be honest, the other thing that accentuates all this is social media. We have a lot of people that are what I like to call keyboard warriors. They're brave, bold online, but in person, they're all cowardly and different. Case in point, last week I was hired to play a gig out in Bridgeport. One of the people on this gig was a guy that spent months telling me that racism isn't real, police brutality against black people isn't real. As a white educator who's been working to educate the blacks, how some of them just don't listen, and I don't know what I'm talking about. And there's a white guy. So this guy spent months telling me this until I just was like, I can't hear your voice no more because you make me want to get up and come to your house and punch you in your face. So I blocked him. Played a gig with this guy. Saw him last week. Hey, how you doing, man? I heard that you got a new job teaching at the university. Man, how's that going? Man, how have things been going for you, man? Yeah, this is everything that he said was like, it never existed. Right. So we have some people that have a social media personality that doesn't match their real life personality. They'll say a bunch of stuff online because there's no consequence in their mind to saying what they want to say. But in person, when there is a consequence, they're not as quick to say the things that they would say online. So this has just kind of accentuated that and has given people the idea that they've got a superpower behind the keyboard where they can be bold with that in places they would never be in person.
Right.
And I say that to say this. There are people that, as you said, they genuinely don't know. I mean, they think that the world is good because they've never seen it. Well, just because you've never seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think that's part of the problem is that people always want to go by their experience without doing any sort of research, without really trying to find out for themselves what's real and what isn't when it comes to some of these things that are happening in our society.
Right. Yeah, and I can agree with that. It's like I'm gonna take it back. And then when you start talking about what people see and learn from the media, that shootout that took place with the little 12-year-old boy and the 14-year-old kid, the two little white kids.
Mm-hmm.
Every conversation around that revolved around, oh my God, that poor little boy, that poor little girl. Can you imagine what and they had a clip. I think I captured the image. Let me see if I have it. But in the clip on the news while the newscaster is speaking, says little boy lost. So this is what people are learning on a regular basis about themselves. This is what they see. So of course they see absolutely nothing wrong with what's happening. So I mean, we have to be. I mean, as people of color, as Black people, we have to be cognizant of that because everybody doesn't get it and everybody doesn't see it, and we assume that they do. So our job is to make noise. We have two options: make noise and do something about it, or pack our bags and completely separate.
And I mean, to be clear on what you're saying, that it's like the media will say, "Oh my gosh, it's a mental illness. Oh my gosh, this person was troubled. Oh my gosh, they were in an abusive home." But when it's someone that don't look like that, this thug, this deviant, this criminal, so if you're constantly consuming a narrative that paints one set of people as disturbed when they do something and another set as evil when they do it, and you don't do any fact checking for yourself, or you don't know the truth for yourself, you're going to believe the narrative you're consuming. And in like fashion, I just want to point out, as the country's been opening up, there's been more mass shootings. What do all those people have in common that have been doing these mass shootings since the country's been opening up? They don't look like anybody on this panel right now.
Nope.
But I'm not hearing that they're criminal deviants. I'm not hearing that they are thugs. I'm not hearing any of that. One guy was told, the guy in Georgia that went into those Asian massage parlors, the chief of the former chief of police was like, "Oh man, he was just having a bad day."
Yeah. That's exactly what they said.
Okay, so that means, if I'm going to interpret your meaning correctly, that if anyone goes out and does what he does, they're just having a bad day and we should give them a break. All three of us know that if that was a person who looked like one of us, he would not be having a bad day. They would be looking down to his element. They would be looking to see if he failed. They'd try to see if he failed the class in kindergarten to point that out. So.
And if you mention it to any white people, they'll be like, you're making a big deal out of it. Oh, everything's not about race.
Well, goes back to my whole Columbus Day thing that I told, and I'll say it again. When a Board of Education member in the city that I live in said that we should that all this stuff about Christopher Columbus is all these bad things about him, that's just Wikipedia stuff, and it's not real history, and we should be getting our education from Wikipedia. And if anything, we should be celebrating the spirit of the man. So when I challenged that, one of those people and said, so in celebrating the spirit of the man, that means I can come to your house, say I've discovered a new world. I can enslave you, your wife, your children, take all your money. I can go to your bank and say that's a new world that I've discovered and claim everything in there, as well as the local Best Buy that your child works at, right? Because that's what Columbus did. So
home invasions should be legal.
So if I'm celebrating the spirit of Columbus, you're going to let me come do that to your home, right? No, you're not.
Yeah. And they don't have a response when you say that. They just roll their eyes like.
Well, no. Actually, the response was, because the response that was given to me when I said that was that, am I questioning whether someone is, it sounds like I'm trying to say that people are racist on the board and that I take resentment to the fact that you're suggesting that some of us need racial sensitivity training. I'm like, no, I'm not saying you might need it. I'm saying you do need it. Because your statements are ignorant and they're not based in fact. So, yes, I am saying that. This is exactly what I'm saying. And if you don't like it, I don't really care because you said something that was woefully ignorant. People don't like it when you hit them with facts. Anytime you hit them with an undeniable, undisputable fact, not an opinion, not a suggestion, not a rewritten portion of history, but an undeniable fact, they always want to come back with you. And it's not just white people, this is people in general. They want to come back with you with anything other than addressing the fact that you hit them with.
It's funny that you say that because I got a problem with all this critical race theory talk. Not the Karens at school board meetings crying that, I just because I wanted my child to know doesn't mean I'm racist. It's just how it's titled, theory. Like there's some supposition involved. It's really Black history. It either happened or it didn't happen. There's no theory about it.
Well, you got to understand that from an academic perspective, why the word theory is being used. It's not being used to say that it hasn't happened. It's being used to say a point of discussion. Like we talk about the theory of evolution. There's some people that treat it like it's a fact. In this case, theory in there is more scientific than it is educational theory. When we start talking about educational theory, we're talking about what is, what isn't, and the challenges of realizing how to make that work. This is more philosophical than anything. And plus, it's also, to be blunt, it's a nice, neat way for academics to say, we want to talk about racism without saying we want to talk about racism. Because in the world of academia, especially when you're not in control of it, sometimes you got to put a bow on it that you don't want to put on it in order to get it in the classroom.
I think it also speaks to narrative. I hear what you're saying, Rob. When I hear the word theory, I think of something that's yet to be proven. That's the first thing I think. Well, it's just a theory. No, this is how we live. It's fact. So I get what you're saying, Hanif, from an academic perspective, but the vast majority of people in this country are not academics. Mm-hmm. And it's all, it's really all about social programming. So I hear what you're saying. But I want to go back to what you said about the two little kids, the 12-year-old and the 14-year-old, and just look how it's portrayed. Because a lot of times we talk about learning, and we're more concerned about what happens in the court system. We pay attention to what happens in the courts. We pay attention to what's happening in the classroom. But we don't pay attention to what we see in the media on a regular basis. People need to just watch this clip. And this is what they're teaching us about their kids in contrast to ours. Let me just...
We're getting our first look at the 12-year-old boy who cops say opened fire at deputies along with a 14-year-old girl. Today he was in court, and considering his age, it's hard to fathom the charges he's facing. Many news outlets have decided to show his face, even though he's a minor, because of the seriousness of the incident and the charges.
Look at this picture right here, Hanif. What do you think when you see that?
I mean, if I'm being honest, I think Psycho.
What do you think, Rob? You see this picture.
Well,
your experiences growing up in New Hampshire, and think about what she just said.
Yeah, I see. Making more excuses for their kids while vilifying our kids. And as you're playing the clip, the thing that I had a flashback to when the Olympics were in Brazil, and the swimmers busted like a 7-Eleven. They were at some 7-Eleven type store, taking stuff, breaking stuff. Remember that?
Yeah,
and they were like, "Oh, boys will be boys. These kids, we gotta they're just kids being kids." The dude, they're 27, 28 years old.
Right. Yeah, but to your point, D, I know what I say Psycho because of what I've seen and what I believe. But the narrative that picture is trying to tell is that this is a child who has problems. He needs to be coddled. He needs to be treated,
compassion,
and be able to get over it with compassion. We don't need to ruin the rest of his life over this one mistake. That's what that picture, that caption, and the graphics are trying to say.
Do you remember the imagery of Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, all those little boys? And I said little boys. They found pictures with hoodies. They try to.
They dig deep. They dig deep to find pictures against our kids. Right. Meanwhile, they're scrubbing the internet to, especially with these cops when they're doing stuff, they're going on their social media, scrubbing, taking all that stuff off so it won't come back to haunt them.
Little boy lost. Let's hear what else she has to say. I think it's hilarious, and people just need to pay attention. This is what we were watching on all the news stations. Instead of people being outraged, these maniacal, crazy, psychotic kids, they found the most innocent image they can find of him. And she just sounds so compassionate as she speaks about him. I just can't imagine the charges that he's dealing with.
Because that boy can look like my son. That could be my son.
Blonde hair. Why not? Okay, Let's check it out. Wrong one. There we go.
Les Trent reports.
He looks like he could be in the principal's office for some silly prank at school. But this 12-year-old is in huge trouble with the law.
You're also charged with attempted first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer.
Travis O'Brien and a 14-year-old girl are accused of opening fire on cops during a 30-minute shootout.
Gunshot fired. Everybody get hard cover. They were coming out to kill cops.
The 12-year-old did not speak during today's hearing, at which the judge referred to him as Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Cops say the boy and the girl ran away from a home for troubled youth.
All right.
Come on, Les.
Yeah, I've seen enough. I'm just
Les.
he
Boy,
looked,
You look at James Clyburn in there.
like he could be sitting in the principal's office.
Wait. Let's notice something else though.
Yep.
They didn't show a picture of the girl.
There's other pictures with the girl.
No.
that's
In that story, what I'm talking about, in that story, they didn't show a picture of the girl. Because anytime there's mess with our young black girls, they got whatever picture they can of her plastered everywhere.
Yeah.
So my thing is the narrative that's being told by these news. I mean, even the choice of the reporter for that story, the choice of having at the desk, blonde hair, blue eyes,
Right.
talking about, look at him, a little boy lost. And then in the field, an elderly black person in the field. I mean, nothing about that is just, oh, here's your assignment for the day.
Coincidental. Yeah.
Everything about that is it's very intentional. It's meant to paint a certain type of picture. It's meant to tell a certain type of story. So, like, my thing is everything about that. This is the reason. Stuff like this is the major reason why I don't even watch the news anymore. Because,
but you know what? For the sake of conversation, for the sake of the narrative, you have to.
let me finish what I'm saying. Let me finish what I'm saying. I don't watch the news anymore every day. I don't. I sit there and I don't, because I get tired of seeing this. But every once in a while, when I hear about a certain story happening, I got to peek up, look at this newscast, look at this paper, and then look at this paper and see what's being said about it and see how it's being said about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I watch this stuff every day, I'm going to just get as upset as I was watching like the news during the pandemic. You know, and for me, I can't do that. But when it comes down to when I start seeing certain stories pop up, now I want to see how the story is being told. Now I want to hear who's saying what, how it's being framed. Because of the fact that if we don't pay attention when these kind of things are happening, we don't know what's the correct counter narrative to put out there into our community so that the truth can be told.
Well, you know what's crazy is when I heard the story, when I first saw the story, I automatically knew that they were white.
Why?
I automatically knew the kids were white. And I'll tell you why.
Because they
I
were
knew.
murdered?
Huh?
Why? Because they weren't killed?
No, that's maybe the third reason.
Okay.
The first reason was they didn't show any pictures when the news was first reporting this.
Mm-hmm.
No pictures. I'm like, oh, these kids gotta be white. These people gotta be white. Because when it's a black person, just like Hanif said, looking for pictures of the hoodie, whatever, they don't have a problem putting that black face up on the screen at all to hit their narrative.
Always.
But I was like, how come there's no pictures? No, white.
Here's the part of the video with the little girl.
Their guns.
Cops say the girl, seen in this photo given to the news media by her father, was shot and wounded when she refused orders to drop the shotgun and opened fire from behind a parked car.
You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at least 10 bullet holes.
30 seconds later, young Travis O'Brien came out of the house with his hands raised.
They shot through the bedroom window. They shot from the garage door. This is like Bonnie and Clyde.
Now these juvenile Bonnie and Clyde desperados have to face the music.
You're
Okay. I've seen enough.
Yeah, me
you know
three.
that Bonnie and Clyde, they're still making movies about Bonnie and Clyde, and they're like America's darlings. I remember, you guys remember in 1976 when they had the Freedom Train go all across the country. I don't know if you guys are old enough for that, but they had the actual car that Bonnie and Clyde drove in with all the bullet holes. And they were like superstars. They're still darling. Movies every other year about Bonnie and Clyde. And they talk about how, America's couple. They were criminals, murderers, bank robbers. So the way they portray these little kids, and at the beginning of the video clip, the newscaster clearly says, typically we don't show the faces of minors. But in this case, we did, because what took place is just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see if they're charged as minors or as adults. And like what you're talking about with Bonnie and Clyde, you got Machine Gun Kelly, Pretty Boy Floyd.
Yeah, I wasn't going down the list because we don't even want to give them any more fame than they already have.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, the point is, they make their mobsters and murderers look like superheroes working for Dominic. When you talk about the Bruno family, all mobsters, gangsters, they were respectable individuals, but they would refer to young other black people who are in gangs and they're just horrible thugs and criminals. How they portray their own is always going to be different. That's why I say narrative is so critically important, that we control our narrative. If little Leroy, beats somebody down and robs them, well, let's get both sides of the story. And let's find out what's happening and let's accurately portray it. Because little Leroy might have been defending his mom. We don't know.
Yeah.
But, we always go with the first negative narrative and we run with it. They take the first positive spin and they move on it really quickly.
That's a good point.
But
just to kind of close the loop, it's it's voting season for the Springfield School Committee. These people need to get voted out, and it doesn't take a lot of votes. If you're really arguing about change, if you really want Commissioner Clapproot out, then you got to get the mayor out. You got to get these school committee members out. There's over 30,000 black people in the city of Springfield. Over 30,000. So if you just take let's say 60% of that 30,000 is voting age, there's not an elected seat in the city of Springfield that can't be controlled by who the black community wants to put in. Period. Because the mayoral vote was 15,000 votes or so?
not that much. Not about 11 to 12,000.
Okay, 11 to 12,000. City councils is what, a few thousand?
About 5,000-6,000.
5,000 or 6,000. School committees a few thousand, right?
About 3,000-4,000. And this year, it's just school committee and city council. So if you get 7,000 votes across the city, it's a good year.
Okay, so
154,000 people.
So if the black community came out and they voted, overnight you can have significant change within the city.
Well,
overnight.
I'm gonna be the guy that says I won't say we'll have significant change if everyone came out and voted. I don't agree with that.
Okay,
what I will say is you'll have a change in personnel, but that doesn't mean you're gonna have a change in policy, because people can get voted in, and that doesn't mean that they're gonna be drinking the same Kool-Aid once they're in there, but they're gonna be about that same agenda. Voting is not enough.
No, I hear what you're saying, Hanif. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm operating under the assumption that you're voting the right people in.
But here's my problem. Everyone said, look, we had an overwhelming amount of people that said Biden's the right guy. What has he done for the black community? The Asian community got a bill right away with 200% increase, which in some cities, and to be clear, I'm not minimizing, people getting knocked out, people getting beat up. I'm not minimizing that. But when you say there's a 200% increase in the city where I'm from, that went from 13 to 39 versus there being more than 39 black people killed by police when they didn't do anything this year. And I'm not even talking about year to date. I'm talking about within the first couple of months of the year across the country. So my thing is, we can always say that someone is the right person based on what they campaign on, but people notoriously campaign on whatever's going to get them in. How many of them actually stay true to that campaign once they're in the seat? So
when you think about it, Spring to Hanif's point, we have 13 city councilors in the city of Springfield. 5 of them are black, 2 are Latino, and then the remaining 6 would be Caucasian. So right now we are the majority, and we're not getting the change. So I get what you're saying. School committee, we had 3 black people. Although they lost the vote and they were outvoted by everybody else on that committee, those 3 blacks still have not come forward and addressed this issue publicly to make sure that these parents know exactly what's happening with their kids. So, Rob, you're absolutely right. If we come out and vote, we can create a complete shift in terms of leadership. But I think Hanif, I'm a challenge what you said. I think we have to do a better job of educating people, which is why we come on this show religiously every week and have these conversations, because people need to know that it's okay. That it's okay to have these conversations and think about your own community first.
But this is where I was going next. This is where I'm going next with what I have to say.
I'm listening.
Once they're voted in, we all have to understand that we have the power to continue to apply pressure. And if they are not doing what they need to do, we have the power to remind them that just as easily as we voted them in, we can vote them out. And those of us that are able, because I realize everyone is not, can search bylaws, can look at procedure and look at policy, because in some of these elected offices, depending on what your city charter says or your state constitution, some of them you can oust them midterm if you get enough signatures in to the right person. We've seen that happen in California already, and they're going to do it. They're trying to do it again this August.
We were going to do it here a few years back with the late city councilor Henry Twiggs. You remember that, Rob? All we needed was 400 signatures, and we were working on it. So you're absolutely right. So I think you're saying what Rob is saying. It's like if people aren't doing due diligence, we have enough people to change the process. We have enough people to replace folks who are not from the mayor from your state senators and state reps all the way down. We have the power to change. And I think that's the message. We understand that when it comes down to the political process, voting is just an entry point. That's the first dollar spent. That's the ticket to get you in the door.
And we're gonna
really important.
And we're gonna talk about that in the coming weeks. Black civics. I mean, we kind of mapped out a conversation, but we've got some other topics we're going to tackle. But that is one of the topics that we're going to tackle, and that kind of came out of Hanif. That came out of when your statements you made about there's a clear making the distinguishment between voting and politics. So it's just like we're going to do a Black Civics 101, just to educate the listeners on, hey, here's voting and this is what this does, but the act or the engagement of politics, this is what this entails, and this is why this is important. To sum it up, holding people accountable. We talked about creating a legislative report card, which is going to take a lot of resources and time to do, but it's kind of, what has this candidate done in the past, specifically to help Black people, not marginalized, not people of color, not minorities, Black people. Because when you look at the caucus web pages, the about web pages of the Hispanic caucus, they specifically talk about doing things and pressing for legislation for the Hispanic people or Spanish-speaking people. When you look at the caucus page of the Asian and Pacific Islanders, they're specifically targeting legislation to help Asians and Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Just go around the websites and you'll see. When you look at the Black caucus, it says African Americans, and then it says marginalized people. And then there's a bullet in there talking about trying to get resources to help minorities. We're the only ones that don't hone in on Black. And when we do hone in, then the narrative is we're being divisive, we're being racist,
the narrative is we just need to do it. Rob, I hear what you're saying. It's just the closing part about the narrative. We got to move past that. We have to think about what takes place in our home first, what's happening in our front yard and our backyard, and that's what we need to focus on.
Quick quiz.
When you talk about the process, there's 2 stages: the electoral process political process. Electoral process gets you in the door. Political process is about accountability and changing existing policy to ensure that your group can achieve a certain quality of life. Go ahead, Hanif.
Quick quiz for you, gentlemen. Can you tell me which minority, under what the government says minority, has received the greatest amount in aid and affirmative action?
White woman.
Yep.
Second would be
exactly. And most people don't even realize that under the law, white women are classified as a minority. So I remember having a discussion with a particular white man who was telling me we need to get rid of affirmative action. I said, well, then your wife isn't going to be able to get as much stuff of your business that she has been able to do right now.
And the face was like,
what do you mean by that? I said, white women are the largest recipients of affirmative action. They're the largest recipients of all of this legislation around aiding minorities. I mean, and it was interesting to watch how when that first round of PPP loans went out there, how a lot of them were received by white women, specifically women whose husbands were either CEOs or owners of big, huge, wealthy companies. And right after they received those PPP loans, which became forgivable, those companies were bought out by their husbands.
Yeah, they set up a different S corp or C corp or whatever, and that's why I have a problem when I hear the term people of color, because that's minority 2.0. That term does not include us. That kind of goes to your comment, Hanif, about white women could be people of color, white people can be people of color, Asians could be people of color, Black people say, oh, people of color, women of color. That does not include us.
But you know what happens when we get caught up in the people of color? It pits one disenfranchised group against another. In the meantime, white women continue winning. White men continue winning. While we're fighting to be the designated minority group or whatever the case may be. It's like the bottom line is dealing with somebody in the bottom of the barrel right along with me fighting them or competing with them helps neither one of us. It's the people who are keeping us in the barrel that we really need to focus on. So I dig everything you're saying, Rob. You're absolutely right. I just think in terms of advocacy for community, we just need to be very clear about who we represent. We're here speaking on behalf of the Black community, and we stop it right there. So I dig what you're saying. But what I don't want to do is look as if I'm competing against the Latino community, knowing that all the same social issues and challenges that we deal with, they deal with it. They may see it from a different cultural lens, but we're all dealing with the same ish. So in the meantime, when we go before the state legislative body, the national legislative body, we just have to be very clear about who we're speaking for. And the problem is we have a lot of cowards who want to be spokespersons for the Black community. And these cowards will never get up. They whisper the word Black. They won't say Black. Well, we're here for everybody because we feel change. We believe in change for everybody. I believe in change for everybody too. But in the meantime, I got some beautiful little kids who need to eat.
Right.
And I need to make sure they eat. So I need to make sure that, the position here is secured first. Once we save us, then we can go back and we can, work to save everybody else. One thing in the Black community, we've always been about fairness and equality for everybody. We give everybody a shot. The only people we don't give a shot to is ourselves 9 times out of 10. So we have to change that. When we go to speak, when we go to lobby, we go to advocate, I must repeat myself. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Black community. This particular Black body, we are concerned with items A, B, C, and D. And we need to have a plan and a process so that we can see this thing through to the end so that we can achieve our outcomes. Typically, we go into meetings with mayors, state reps, state senators, and we go in there and we jabber, we pontificate on bullshit, but we never really ask them for anything specific. So when people talk about the political process, please be clear, always go in ready and prepared to ask for something specific. Better yet, not ask. Once you voted, you go in and you demand something specific. So these are things we'll get to. We're at the 1 hour mark, and there's 2 more things I want to talk about. Unless you guys have anything you want to comment on.
I just want to. Before you go to this next thing, I just want to address what you just finished saying. It goes back to something that you've said before. It kind of goes back to it goes back to a very continual thing. One thing that you've said before is that we have to have resource mapping. We have to know who's in the community that can do what and how everyone can take their part. And it also goes back to something else that's been said on this program many times. If we want these changes to be effective, if we want them to work, if we want them to be long-lasting and continual, we have to make sure that we rebuild our neighborhoods and our communities and get them back to being what they've always been and what they should be, where you actually know your neighbors and you actually care about each other and you're actually working together with one another. Because I can tell you where I live, I don't know everyone on my block, but where I grew up, that wasn't the case. So when things happen, people banded together and things work together. So we have to know who's on our street and who's capable of doing what in our streets.
Absolutely. I think in our neighborhoods are reflective of how we treat our neighborhoods like we treat our bodies. Our neighborhoods are reflective of our thought process. We're typically all over the place. We focus on nothing, and we haven't gotten our shit together. If the Black community was one collective body, we'd be suffering from severe mental health issues brought on about because of this post-traumatic slave syndrome. And it's just kind of like there are things that we need to get resolved. It's hard to work on the neighborhoods if we haven't worked on this. If I want to be a great musician, I need to sit at the feet of at the elders of the master musicians and learn my craft well. If I want to get my neighborhood together, I need to sit at the feet of the scholars and the social engineers in our community and pay attention to the plan. So there's a lot that we need to do, but we really have to break that down in stages. We can't just say, I dig what you're saying, but it's hard to say we have to go back and get our neighborhoods together. How do you get your neighborhoods together when you can't collect your thoughts? You ever look at a man's closet or a woman's closet and you wonder why their life is scattered and they're all over the place? It's reflective of their thought process. So we have to change that narrative. We have to do a better job of deprogramming and then reprogramming our people to see themselves completely different. Critical. We have to see ourselves completely different. We have to, as my man Gary Porter says, we have to purge the colonizer from our thought process. And we have to see ourselves in a different light. Period. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. Political process means absolutely nothing. My man David Smith posted something on my timeline yesterday. I said something about a system that sets out to destroy you, it cannot be relied upon to save you. And the brother, he wanted to, deflect and talk about should Black people continue to be Democrats or should we consider being Republicans? We talked about the system itself. The system is maintained by libertarians, Green Party, Republicans, Democrats. They're all looking out for their own agendas, social, cultural agendas. Until we begin to see ourselves as separate, I don't care about the Republican or a Democrat. When I see Black bodies dying and I see both Democrats and Republicans, justifying the murder of Black bodies that have died. Who cares if you're a Republican or a Democrat? Who cares if you vote or not? If they're not respecting your vote because you are politically powerless, because you don't think you have power, then we have a problem. We need to get our thought process together. We need to organize everything in our heads. We need to think differently, act differently, respond to situations differently. We need to organize differently.
I agree. So what were the other two things, D, that you said you wanted to mention?
No, were you guys done? Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good on this topic.
You sure? Okay. And I'm sorry, I get a little passionate when it comes to our people, man. I'm just like, we just got some shit to do. So not debating or arguing with anybody. That's just how I talk. The other thing is, I want to remind people that today at 6:00, we'll be watching the movie Buck Breaking, and you're gonna see me on my soapbox again because it's hard to watch that film and not get on the soapbox. I'm gonna play a quick clip so people can get a better understanding of what Buck Breaking is.
I can't wait, man.
People thought it was a slave movie. Folks were saying, we don't need no more slave movies. It's not. It's a docu-film. It's a documentary-sized film that focuses on the plight of, of Black sexual exploitation in this country over the last couple of 100 years. So here it is.
When we talk about buck breaking, we have to understand that buck breaking is a show of power. It's a show of dominance. So we can't talk about buck breaking without talking about power.
When we look at the domination of Black people by the dominant society, what we are in essence seeing is that this society wants to ensure that we are not able to actually mete out that thing that makes humans exist, and that is creating families and procreating.
See, psychologically, when we're talking about the sexualizing of our people, primarily from the dominant society or the system of white supremacy, it had to be established in a very impinging way from the mental state.
This whole notion that masculinity is somehow toxic and detrimental to society is nothing but an attempt to emasculate black malehood.
It's clearly an agenda. If you have two eyes in your head and you're able to see, you can see that it's an agenda, and it's an agenda to decrease our population.
It's always been about destroying the black family. The family is the foundation of a people.
The heterosexual black male is last on the pecking order here in America. If you're just a heterosexual black man, how are you gonna beat the case? Because when you show up to court, when you show up to the job interview, when you show up to wherever, you coming in here as a heterosexual black man, you have no power.
When Mark Twain confessed that we white people ground the manhood out of the Negro. Why ground the manhood out of the Negro? Because it's black masculinity that most exposes the fraud of white masculinity.
We, as the progenitors of culture, the ones who are the fathers and mothers of civilizations, who taught all people, who people look to for social cues, whether they want to realize it or not, I think they feel if they can get us to adapt to it, they can get everybody to adapt to it.
If anybody should have a problem with European males, it should be the European female. Because everything the European male has ever learned to do to us, he first practiced on his own woman.
We need resources in education, we need resources in labor, we need resources in politics, we need resources in medical, we need resources in so many things, but they ignore that and they put millions and even billions of dollars to tell us that you need to really embrace your LBGT side. So these people have an agenda, and it's up to us to understand what the agenda is.
That's powerful.
So we'll be talking about that this evening at 6 p.m. at Our Journey, 321 Albany Street in Springfield. Rob Jones is going to be late, but he will be moderating. People will agree.
Why you gotta put that late stuff in, man?
There are going to be people who are going to agree with the content. There are going to be people who disagree in the worst way, and that's cool too. So we're asking that people come together and have that conversation. Let's watch this film. Let's talk about this film, and let's have some dialogue around it. Doesn't mean that we disagree we'll be disagreeing to the point we'll never speak to each other again. We just need to learn how to have dialogue and discourse around issues around black sexuality and everything that it entails. When we talk about deprogramming and reprogramming, that's all a critical part of it. So we look forward to that conversation today. You guys, anything you want to say about that film, Rob?
Listen, it's
I'm curious. I'm sorry, Rob. I can't wait to hear what Hanif says about the trailer. But go ahead, Rob.
No, it's powerful in its knowledge, and if you really want to know about history and about all the hidden agendas against us, this is just one agenda.
Yeah,
there's so many other hidden agendas against us, and we've got documentaries to educate, discuss, and address those agendas as well. But if you want to live in a vacuum and just be abstruse to what's going on, then in my opinion, you don't got a right to complain. Just be lucky that you're not a statistic. If you want to learn what's going on, if you got kids you're raising, you got nieces and nephews and cousins you're concerned about, got to know what's going on. I mean, to this day, I don't let my son. Someone's telling me about an overnight basketball camp. I'm like, yeah, no. But go ahead, Hanif.
When I watch that trailer, there's a whole lot of things that come to mind for me for a variety of reasons. But listening to what they're saying, it dates back to so much about history that people don't know and people don't understand. I mean, just the title of the movie itself, buck breaking. Most people not understanding that a buck, the original definition of a buck, was a male animal. And when you go back to, where the buck of slaves happened, one of the largest buck breaking plantation was in Jamaica. And if you understand that, you understand why a lot of males in Jamaica have a problem with homosexuality. when you understand what buck breaking was. In the context of this film, I wish I could be there tonight because I would love to see this film. But I also think that a lot of the things that are being said in the trailer, it's just an appetizer because it doesn't even get close to what like this really amounts to being, what this really is. And let me say this, for those of you that will look at who made this film and say, I shouldn't listen to this brother because of who he's, because who he's affiliated with, you need to get over that, because I'm a Black Christian male who wants to see this film. All right. You need to get over who made it and look at the content and evaluate the content for what the content is, and evaluate the content to see if the content is correct and relevant or not. It shouldn't matter who made it. Right. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because anytime this particular brother is involved in something and it starts getting major attention in this country, people are always trying to put him down for some reason. They're going to say he's militant or he's with the nation or whatever. I don't really care. I mean, because people don't say that about Woody Allen, So, if we're not going to talk about Woody Allen or Roman Polanski and all their stuff, like, watch it and evaluate it for what it is, and see. And if you don't find any relevance in your life or in the life of the people around you, that's on you. But this is, in my opinion, it's a very important documentary that I think everyone should watch, Black, white, and everything in between.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Thank you. And the last thing I want to say is don't forget July 1st, Thursday, July 1st, 7 p.m. Mark your calendars. We're asking everybody to come out. There's a mixer, a professional networking mixer for Black professionals. There will be live entertainment. Wait till we announce the band that we're going to have there. There will be power networking, which means we strongly encourage people to bring your business cards, bring, product, materials, anything talking about the business that you engage in. Be there. The education will have speakers talking about different facets of running your business, different ways of improving your status on your job, talking about how to navigate the corporate process so that you can move up. So there's going to be a lot happening Thursday, July 1st. Art for the Soul Gallery, 1500 Main Street, Springfield, Mass. We have a number of sponsors on board. City Councilor Tracy Whitfield, Neurologic Optical Wellness Physical Therapy with Dr. Katrina Banks, Acello Painting, Spirit Life Entertainment, Chest Angels Promotions, Art for the Soul Gallery, the Boys and Girls Club Family Center, Level 5 Restaurant, Soulful Connections, African Diaspora Mental Health Association, Springfield Family Doula Services, the Pan-African Historical Museum. Yes, we have a Pan-African Historical Museum in Springfield. Another business, Just Aging Different, and also City Councilor Malo Brown. So these are all Black businesses, all Black professionals, 2 Black city councilors. And right now, this is just a partial list. We have about 5 more people, 5 more businesses to add to that list. So it's growing every day. Our job is to bring folks together to prove that we can definitely work together and nothing is impossible. When Hanif talks about capacity mapping, this is capacity mapping. We need to know who our professionals are. We need to know who our business community are. We need to know who's in our business community. Let me reframe that. And when we talk about, social movement and social engineering, it has to be financed by something. Every other community, they rely on their business community to underwrite all their undertakings. We have to do the same. We have a Black business community. It's time that we teach them to identify who and what they are and create a clear expectation of what their role should be. In the Black business community, we keep talking about Black Washington, Tulsa. We talk about Charleston. We talk about Charlotte. We talk about all the old Black industrious communities, but we don't talk about what we have now. Here in the city of Springfield, Hartford, Bloomfield, Windsor, New Haven, Stanford, Bridgeport, we have strong Black business communities. We've done a horrible job in terms of organizing them into a strong political entity, and that's the goal. With that being said, this is On Deck. Any closing comments, fellas?
I was to say, everyone who can, if you haven't made plans to show up to watch this documentary tonight, you need to. And if you can't get there to watch it tonight, you need to get a hold of it and you need to see this.
Absolutely.
Yep, you can buy it at buckbreakingmovie.com. I got my
DVDs for sale tonight at the viewing. So come buy your DVD.
Yes, sir.
All right, everybody. Much love, much peace, much respect to each and every one of you. We thank you for joining. For those who tuned in and left, thank you. For those who are still tuned in, thank you. We appreciate you. Tell somebody, tell somebody, tell somebody else if you're interested in coming on as a guest or as a panelist. If you heard something that moved you, something that got you triggered, something that made you angry, something that made you smile, doesn't matter. If you want to come on and speak your piece in regards to an issue that we've been, an issue or challenge or a topic that we focused on, yo, you're more than welcome to join us. That's what we're here for. All right. With that being said, this is On Deck, y'all. We out.
All right.